Hind told emergency call operators she was the only one left alive and begged them to come and rescue her.
A new Washington Post investigation has uncovered more heart-wrenching details about the deaths of a 6-year-old Palestinian girl and the men who tried to save her life back in January. As we've seen repeatedly, the Post's findings conflict with Israel's claims that the Israeli Defense Forces were not, in fact, responsible for this tragedy. Now, Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old girl, and her family lived in the northern part of Gaza City for decades. But they fled further west as attacks by the Israeli Defense Forces were underway. At 9:32 a.m. on January 28th, the IDF put out a statement in Arabic on X, asking residents in the west of Gaza City to evacuate immediately. In response, Hind's uncle, Bashar, and his wife loaded Hind and her 4 cousins into a car to evacuate the area. Their plan was to drive north out of the evacuation zone and back toward the family home in northern Gaza City. But they didn't make it that far. The family stopped less than a quarter of a mile from where they started. Around 1 p.m., Hind's cousin, 15-year-old Layan, called Bashar's brother, Samir. She told him they were surrounded and the Israeli army had opened fire on their car. Everyone in the vehicle except for Hind and Layan were dead, she said. Samir called another uncle, Mohammed, who eventually reached the Palestinian Red Crescent Society. A dispatcher first reached Layan around 2:30 p.m.
الو مرحبا.
ايوه بطخوا علينا. الدبابه جنبي.
انتم متخبيين؟
في السياره احنا جنبينا الدبابه.
انتم جوا السياره؟
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TRT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who can make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you. Thank you.
The girl screamed and the call dropped. But while the dispatcher spoke to Layan, 62 gunshots were heard over 6 seconds in 2 bursts of fire. It's all recorded on the call. And in case there's any confusion over who's responsible for firing the shots, Stephen Beck, an acoustic analyst who consulted with the FBI for more than a decade, examined the recording at the request of the Post and found the number of rounds per minute fired was faster than an automatic AK patterned rifle, which Hamas fighters often use. The rate, he said, was more akin to weapons commonly issued to Israeli forces. So this evidence indicates that the family was fired at and killed by the IDF. But unfortunately, there's more. The call with Layan, which began around 2:30, ended in less than a minute. A satellite image captured roughly an hour later shows at least 4 Israeli armored vehicles around 300 meters up the road from the girls. After the call with Layan ended, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society operations room called back immediately. That's when Hind answered and told the dispatcher that Layan was dead. She also communicated that Israeli tanks were moving toward the car.
الدبابة وين؟ الدبابة جنبكم؟ عم تتحرك ولا واقف؟ نزل حدا منها؟
هي بتتحرك.
تتحرك؟ هي بتتحرك جنب السيارة ولا هي جاية من ورا السيارة أو من قدام السيارة؟
من قدام السيارة.
هي جاية عليكي من قدام السيارة الدبابة؟ قريب كتير؟
كتير.
وعم تمشي؟
I just want you guys to consider what it's like to be a 6-year-old kid trapped in a car with a bunch of your dead family members, scared for your own life. Anyway, I'm sorry, it's just difficult to get through this story. At 5:40 p.m., Fathi Abu Warda, a liaison between the Palestinian Authority's health ministry in Ramallah and Kogat, an arm of the Israeli Defense Ministry that oversees the Palestinian territories, said that permission for an ambulance to proceed to Hind arrived in the form of a route map from Kogat. So Israelis are the ones who are communicating the route map. Abu Warda sent the map to the Palestinian Red Crescent Society dispatch team on WhatsApp at 5:40 p.m., according to messages reviewed by the Washington Post. So the map appeared to have been made in Google Maps and had a clear blue line instructing the ambulance drivers to follow a specific route. The paramedics headed out quickly to the location where Hind was trapped, using the route that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Ministry, had apparently given them. The paramedics were driving with the lights of the ambulance flashing when a green laser was seen hovering just in front of them. The dispatcher told the ambulance to keep moving slowly, but just seconds later, the line drops.
خليك معي شايف السيارة أنت؟ مش شايف المشغل السرينة واللواح؟
السرينة لا
As the call with paramedics drops at 6 p.m., a bang is audible on the call with Hind. At that point, she tells dispatchers she's okay, but they soon lost contact with her, this time for good. It wasn't until 12 days later, on February 12th, when the IDF finally withdrew from the area, that a Palestinian civil defense crew was able to reach the horrific scene. They found Hind's body in a car riddled with bullets, according to her uncle Samir Hamada, who also arrived at the scene early that morning. The door and pieces of the hood of the family car had been torn off. Samir described his brother's body as dangling from the driver's seat. Holes in Hind's family car were consistent with a machine gun used by Israeli tanks. The ambulance, which was found about 50 meters away from the car Hamda was killed in, was completely charred, as you saw in the video. None of the 6 munitions experts interviewed by the Washington Post could say definitively what munition caused the damage or killed the paramedics based on the ambulance alone, because of the time elapsed and the complexity of urban combat. They agreed, however, the damage to the ambulance was consistent with the potential use of a round fired from Israeli tanks that matched the vehicles captured in satellite imagery in the area that day. Among the killed Palestinians were, of course, 6-year-old Hind Rajab, Bashar Hamada and his 13-year-old daughter, Layan, along with 4 other family members. The paramedics who were killed were Yusuf, Zeno, and Ahmad al-Madoun. The Israeli Defense Forces originally claimed that their forces weren't even present or within firing range of the Hamada family car. But later, the US State Department said the Israelis admitted that there had, in fact, been IDF units in the area. So once again, detailed investigations pour cold water on Israel's denials. After this story published, State Department spokesman Matt Miller said the following, quote, "The death of Hind Rajab is an unspeakable tragedy. So what we are going to do is take the information that is contained in the Washington Post story. We're going to go back to the government of Israel and ask them for further information. We would still welcome a full investigation into this matter and how it occurred in the first place." Let me go ahead and decode Matt Miller's statement for you. The US government is going to do absolutely nothing about it. Nothing is going to change. The conduct of the IDF will continue. More innocent people will be slaughtered, including little kids like 6-year-old Hind. And Americans get to feel super hopeless about it because both political parties are overwhelmingly in support of anything and everything the Israeli government wants to do. And then, even if they're found guilty of murdering a 6-year-old girl, right? Even if that's the case, does anyone really think that the Biden administration or whoever's in charge, it doesn't really matter, even if it was Donald Trump, is anyone really under the illusion that the weapons that we transfer over to Israel are going to have any strings attached. Okay. And like, how many times are we going to see instances of paramedics being targeted, of kids getting killed? It's just going to continue. And that's the worst part about all of this. You see the faces of the kids who get killed. You see the outcome of the investigations. And then you see the pathetic response by our State Department and our federal government. And what they communicate every day to us is the lives of one side matter. What happened to Israeli civilians it can only be amounted to an atrocity, should only be considered terrorism. And I agree with that take entirely. But when it comes to little girls like Hind, a 6-year-old whose final moments on this earth consisted of her being trapped in a car with her dead relatives, we're gonna ask some questions and then hope that the American people will forget about this story. Some of us don't forget. I'm one of them. These are the kinds of stories that blacken my heart.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members.